We have had salary and years of agreement proposals on the table as our first thing to talk about, but I am noticing when we last left this room, Dr. Brown said that today we would either have acceptance or a counter proposal on the ITA salary proposal. And seeing no counter proposal, I am wondering, does that mean we have acceptance?
No, no, we do not. But I understand technicalities.
I am not surprised.
We don't have a counter proposal today.
Awesome. So I want to be honest where we are. We are in a teacher retention crisis here in the ICSD, and the ITA negotiations have proposed a viable solution. ICSD negotiations has decided to leave it unsolved. So Chris's and my presentation, it's going to show a few things. It's going to show ICSD's teacher retention crisis is real. It's worsening. It's going to show that the root cause is structural salary failure. It's going to show that ICSD's counterarguments rely on flawed data, faulty logic, and do not solve the crisis. It's going to show that a step in lane system properly funded at a 7% average raise over the next 4 years will solve this crisis. And it's going to show that ICSD can absolutely afford our proposal. Our evidence is overwhelming. Our teacher turnover rate is not, as ICSD negotiations has claimed, just the natural teacher shortage. It's an annual 18%. It's higher than New York State. It's higher than the national average. 10 years ago, 83% of our members were tenured. Today, just 57% are. And for the first time ever, over 100 new teachers were hired 3 years in a row. These aren't new roles, these are replacements. That's churn, that's instability, and that's not how you build a staff that stays. And so to our friends in the gallery, raise your hands if you've anecdotally noticed an increase in your colleagues leaving the ICSD. That looks like 139 hands. Wow, that's a lot. Okay, let's see how that goes. You know the teacher retention crisis to be true because you've seen it, you've felt it. ICSD negotiations has proven it over the past negotiation sessions. And ICSD has never refuted these numbers because they can't. They've claimed there's a national teacher shortage, and sure there is. But why is it worse here? They have no answer. Can you scroll that down, Chris? No. Wow, I'll go back and just, yeah, I got it. They've been playing a game of distraction. We showed that there were 133 departures in 2024, and they countered, well, we show 103, and we said, let's work with that. They then used that one discrepancy to cast doubt on everything we presented, as if one adjusted figure erased 10 years of trend lines. They never refuted the big picture that about 60 resignations happen annually. They've confirmed that. They never challenged the tenure drop. They never presented their own exit survey data because they don't have it. And that's been their approach along the way. So we're going to consider a teacher, Joe. Joe moves to Lansing with 3 years prior experience in 2010. He interviews in 5 local school districts, accepting a position in the ICSD. And he assumes that with an Ivy League school in town, his salary will be competitive with neighboring districts. So let's look at Joe's lifetime earnings from 2010 to 2025. Additionally, we'll follow Joe down 5 roads he could have traveled had he made a different decision in 2010. So here we go, going to South Seneca. Over those 15 years, he would have made 72,000 and change more in South Seneca. Can we go on? In Trumansburg, $82,000 more. In Dryden, 86. Corning, $107,000 more over those 15 years. These are not cherry picked. These are the first 5 we looked at. Joe is down He's lost over a year of salary over his life. That's gone. That's more than a year of college tuition for his now college-age kid. That's a few major home repairs. Over his years in the ICSD, he's seen great colleagues come and go, and he's rebuilt teams more time than he can count. And he's thinking about making the jump to another district, like so many of his colleagues have. We've brought clear salary comparisons. 5 districts where the ICSD teachers have lost up to $100,000 over time. ICSD's answer? Well, we've heard a story about a superintendent's hiring privilege in Lansing, as if that explains why we are being outpaid in all directions at once. Can you scroll it? That's it. They've tried to divide us. ICSD has loudly proclaimed that our step and lane system would give some members 3.5% raises and others 19%. That sounds pretty wild. It's not true. But here's the thing, that ICSD, they believed it was true. Why did they believe it was true? They don't have all of our records. Prior years of service, some of those were never kept. Grad credits, incomplete, spotty. Let's talk about Carrie. ICSD's records say that she has 0 prior years experience and 0 grad credits. So they plugged that in their spreadsheet. They said, well, she'll get a small raise. But the truth, Carrie got married in her first year, changed her last name. ICSD lost track of her actual credits and prior experience. They plugged in zeros. They used that misinformation to argue against fairness. Carrie actually came in with 17 years prior experience, 42 grad credits. And situations like this, they are not a fluke. They are a pattern. We have dozens of situations where they don't have the data. We can find the data, they haven't found it, and they're exaggerating the severity of a step and lane and the disparity of raises. Let's go on to the next. We're going to talk a little bit about leapfrogging. We've heard a lot about that. This happens constantly. You can do everything right, you can gain years, you can earn credits, and you can still watch someone with less experience make more than you. And that's what leapfrogging is, and that's what our members are living through. When we called out leapfrogging, when we showed hundreds of cases of it, ICSD didn't deny it, they listened. But here's what they didn't say. They didn't say, you're right, the system is broken, let's fix it. They said, instead, bring us your poor, you're leapfrogged, we'll have some conversations. As if we were talking about 5 clerical errors. We are not, we are talking about a systemic problem. We are talking about one that violates the intent of our contract, Article 25A2, and one that's hurting us year after year. And can we just see the back of your t-shirt? What does your t-shirt on the back say? Oh, since teacher working conditions are student learning conditions, that means it's hurting our students and our children. We're talking about hundreds of systematically created situations. ICSD first, if you remember, squabbled about the definition of leapfrogging. Not to fix the retention crisis, but to say that if we change the definition, then we're not culpable. ICSD then said, fine, we're culpable, but you're culpable too. You agreed on this. And again, notice the rhetoric. They're not really negotiating, thinking about what's in the best interest of teachers. They're litigating. They're spreading blame. So they're not at fault for allowing so many employees to be leapfrogged. Let's go on. Finally, they told us it's their philosophy that someone who earned credits 15 years ago should make more than someone who earned the same credits recently. And ICSD calls this a philosophy, but let's call it what it is. It's a justification for why they don't want to fix the leapfrogging. This isn't about academic theory. It's about 2 people with the same credits, the same experience, being paid differently because of when they earned them. We all remember what some of that credit earning looked like. You remember Think Blocks? That was a training from over a decade ago involving clear acrylic cubes in a shoebox, or maybe burning a CD or organizing an H drive, or hours and hours of Fountas Spinell training on a theory of literacy instruction that has since been debunked. Now compare that to the deeply reflective anti-racist coursework many of our colleagues are engaging in today. Who's better serving students? The teacher with a closet full of dusty plastic blocks, or the one helping kids interrogate privilege and build inclusive classrooms? This is not a philosophy, it's a justification for inequality. And it's one that the ICSD cannot defend, when you actually look at what our profession values today. Your data shows us that under the ICSD's current salary system, salary compression starts right at year 2. There's no built-in way to decompress. This issue will compound over the course of a teacher's career. And I just want to point this out. It's right in the salary grid. Here's Gary. I'm just going to read this. Here's Gary. He comes in 2023. He has no credits, no prior years, and he earns 51,241. That's on our grid. Going into 24, 25, we can take out our phones, do a little math, and do 51,241 times 4%. Gary's going to make this year 53,291. It's his second year. Here comes Larry. 2024, 0 credits, 0 prior years. Larry's going to make 53,291. That's Larry. That's Gary. There are dozens of these situations. Gary should just quit. Come back $800. He had a previous year experience. He can get more money if he just quits and comes back. That's happening right now. This isn't like off the top of our head. That is in your contract. This is happening. Dozens. ICSD is the only local district still operating without a step and lane system. 26 of 34 neighboring districts use one. It ends leapfrogging. It prevents salary compression, and it ends the Gary Larry nonsense. It creates clarity. It creates trust. Why aren't we doing it? We built a plan to fix this. The ICSD offered none. Since our framing of the retention crisis, they've had 9 bargaining sessions to propose solutions. No solutions, no tenable alternative, no evidence. We came to fix a crisis. So here we are, the school year's almost over. While ICSD has refused to solve the problem, we will not stop telling the truth about it. We're the solution, and our students deserve stability. Our community deserves better. Our educators deserve to stay. I'm going to hand this over to my colleague, Chris, who's going to explain once more exactly how our plan is not only affordable, but it's sustainable. So let's go to Chris.
All right, Brian, thanks for laying that out. For me, the main takeaway from that slideshow is our definition of leapfrogging, which I think is powerful, was well articulated in terms of our philosophy. And I just want to emphasize again, we got the most recent data from the district, the district's most updated and correct data we got 2 or 3 weeks ago. And we based our most recent proposal around that. The main thing we wanted to emphasize from that most updated data, there are hundreds of teachers. Of our 600 members, 400 of them have been leapfrogged. Obviously, it's obscene in year 1 and 2, as Brian pointed out, but a 15 or 16-year teacher like me, on average, is being leapfrogged 8 to 10 times. It's pervasive. And the obvious solution, the only solution, is obviously step and lane. We've talked to the district about this at some length, and I got the impression in our last session that the superintendent was coming around to recognizing that step and lane was the only solution. And then it was becoming a debate over what percentage raise we would need in the step and lane to create some equity and deal with some compression. And we discussed salary at our last session just briefly. And at that time, the superintendent said, you know, before we get in the weeds, let's make sure we're on the same playing field. Like, are we close? The thought was like the gap between our proposal and the ICSD's current offer must be huge. So we spent some time this week looking at it. And what I want to emphasize, I don't see a significant gap. Assuming goodwill on the part of the district, assuming they understand leapfrogging is a significant problem, assuming that they understand we're losing a ridiculous number of teachers and that our pay isn't competitive, the solution is, I mean, it's staring you in the face. And to be blunt, I think our team, I personally was disappointed that the district didn't bring any kind of counteroffer to today, which is our second to last negotiation session. That, I guess I won't elaborate further. It won't be constructive. But what I want to emphasize today to the district team is that we're remarkably close together and the solution is within your grasp. I certainly hope you present it to us at the meeting next Thursday.
So you're talking about those green numbers there?
Yeah, let me,
a difference.
let me, so Brian is my favorite math person as well as personal hero. And so he's emphasized the difference between the district's current offer, which we consider 5%. To be clear, they threw some stuff at us to get the 5%, like extra hours in the day. But clearly they're showing they have the money to pay us, and we'd like it. If it's a raise, we're not going to work extra for it. We simply would like that money. So A 5% offer, which the district clearly has the ability to pay, versus our 7% proposal, which is an average 7% increase in our salary every year for 4 years, which we think could make a meaningful dent in the leapfrogging issue and retain teachers, is actually remarkably achievable. As you can see, in year one, we're apart by less than $1 million, 770,000. Year two, also less than $1 million. You might ask yourself, where are we going to get that money from? There's been, although the district has provided very few specifics and hasn't changed their theoretical pot of money since February, when they didn't have the most recent state aid data, for example, the funds are available. We have come up with some solutions that we could present to the district. To me, B1 is the most obvious. If you look at the district's budgeted expenditures versus actual payments for salary over the last several years, consistently more is budgeted than actually spent. How much more? It averages $4 million a year more. We need something like $1 million to pay for our gap. The money is staring you in the face. Please give us that money on Thursday of next week. If you wanted to go deeper, that to me, clearly, obviously there's money there. But if you wanted to go deeper, we speculated in some other ways for the district. We looked at our ridiculously high turnover rate and the fact that that would change with a step and lane system plus a significant raise. We would go to being maybe a decently paid district compared to some of our competitors. And that would prevent turnover. Turnover is obviously expensive in terms of hiring new teachers. That estimate of 330,000 is actually extremely conservative. If you use our newest number of what it might cost to rehire and train teachers, it would actually be double that. But regardless, there's a significant pool of money. Our team also feels that the district is spending a large amount of their budget on hiring teachers from outside the district to fill contracted positions because we can't find teachers, especially in high needs areas, that are legally required for special education, especially. And so they're paying outside contractors a significant amount of money, $1.4 million to cover those positions. Hopefully we could do some of that internally and that would easily cover the gap. In number 4, there's some thoughts about if we really needed to, freezing some parts of the budget to come up with $1 million. Again, to me, not even necessary. We've already come up with more than $5 million so far. Clearly, the money is available. And then the final point I want to make, the district, especially early on, was very hesitant with the step and lane system. And one of the things they were most worried about was the long-term liability of a step and lane system. The idea that even when our contract expires, people will continue to gain experience and therefore they will move to different steps. You know, like next year, I'll go from year 15 to year 16, and there's going to be a raise baked into that step and lane system. And the thought was, is that unsustainable? Is that dangerous? Is that risky for the district? I think clearly the opposite is true. It's about the most conservative possible way for the district to budget responsibly into the future. Over the course of our 4-year contract, we have different step and lane systems, and the gap between year 1 and year 2 is going to be an average increase of 7%. And between year 2 and year 3, the average gap is going to be an increase of 7%. And that's true from year 3 to year 4. But in year 4, our final grid system in our step and lane, that just becomes the agreement. It becomes permanent unless we agree to something different in our next contract negotiation. So if we don't agree to anything after the end of our 4-year current contract, well, the contract we're hoping to negotiate, when it finishes 4 years from now, we are simply on the grid, the final step and lane grid that we proposed. And on that grid, the gaps between steps in terms of like gaining a year of experience average 2% or less. That is extremely conservative. It's way lower than the inflation rate over the last 50 years. It's dramatically lower than the inflation rate that just killed us in our last contract. It's something that the district can budget for today, for the future, forever. And the idea that they're locked into some kind of untenable position, the opposite is true. They are guaranteed the most conservative possible raises going forward. Each teacher after that 4th year simply moves up a step. The people closest to retirement actually retire. The district stops paying the highest salaries that there are. Extremely conservative future situation. There's some other justifications up there in 2 and 3 in terms of the obvious need to have something predictable for employees, for our HR department, for the hundreds of teachers that we currently have to go back through their data and find their accurate last names and credits. But the one thing I want to emphasize, let's see. Oh, and number 2, in terms of the accuracy of our data, I've spent time with a lot of members at the high school lately, and we have found some significant issues through the salary review process that has generally taken a month or more for individual members. There's some significant problems. A good friend of mine who has more than 20 years of experience, the district salary review just got back to her with a number that she's likely missing $18,000 over the last 16 years. The district obviously owes her $18,000 plus interest, which wasn't offered. Interest for sure on those 16 years, by the way. We'll insist on that, I hope. But to me, it also brings forward an equity issue. The inaccuracies of the data, the underpayment over years is especially true for people that have taken maternity leaves, for example, or any kind of child rearing leave. Those are where the biggest mistakes seem to lie so far. So from a basic equity and fairness and accountability and planning, and it's just so obviously the solution. It's staring us in the face. We've reached the end of negotiations. The district so obviously has the money to solve the problem. They came with nothing today. I can only hope and assume that on Thursday, they will agree to a step and lane system with 7% raises on average per year. And we look forward to that offer.